Really?
Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time we're playing some Paladin, some White Mage and some Gunbreaker, shortly before Bloodmess. And this set was surprisingly varied, starting with duty 1, Ultima weapon Extreme as Paladin. A couple of tips for a fight like this with a rather strict tank switch that your co-tank may not be aware of is first to try and make them pull first, so you can perform the tank switch as needed first. When you then eventually provoke, if necessary, carefully manage your own lead by managing your tank stand so you are not too far ahead in case your co-tank is on the weaker side too. The reason for this is that if your co-tank is at most 25% enmity behind you, shirking them can function as a backup tank switch when you want it, if they don't know to do it. I made use of this setup for this fight to be on the safe side, but it turned out my Sprout co-tank knew what to do on that front. Another tank tip for this fight is that a tank can take 2 orbs mostly as they are, more with defensive cooldowns, so if your team isn't very good about picking up orbs, you can carry hard. Unfortunately, on the first pull, despite me resolving 3 of the 4 orb pairs at the end of the fight, the 4th pair is not dealt with and we wipe. On the run back, everyone is a lot more aware of the orbs and help, so we promptly clear right then. For duty 2, we went to Ghimlyt Dark in the weird level range where you have Requiescat but not Holy Circle. A tip for this is that Requiescat boosted Holy Spirits are still worth using on 3 targets, so on those AoE pulls, you could still use this to finish off a fight. Just make sure to target the healthiest mob in the pack as you clean up if there is a difference. Now, aside from our sudden Viper death right at the end of the final boss fight, we did very well here. For duty 3, we went to Rathalos Extreme with apparently a full community squad. That's a surprise. Agent Monica, Vespi, and Ilana representing. A funny thing that happened in phase 1 is that several tailspins managed to connect, yet it seems like they either never or rarely stun here. What makes that funny to me is that it seems like almost all avoidable damage from Rathalos applies its stun, but not the tailspin? In actual Monster Hunter, if there was ever an attack to sometimes catch me multiple times in a row, it would either be the classic hip check or the tailspin. And in those games, you usually get stunned specifically by being hit 2 to 3 times in quick succession. For phase 2, despite both of our Reapers managing to get hit together by an avoidable attack, and a follow-up being lethal twice, both times no one died because Rathalos just decided to not follow through both times. This fight truly is dictated by a lot of randomness. Aside from this, we managed to get through the fight very fast. For duty 4, we went to A6N, Blaster, Brawler, Swindler and Vortexer. The particularly standout boss of the 4 for most parties is Brawler. The way that it works is that it regularly builds a stacking magic vuln on the main tank, which matters because its mechanics do a lot of magic damage. Now, those mechanics are, drill in one hand means a line AoE through a player, doesn't really matter. Single laser on one hand means magic tank buster. Double laser means line stack, and at minimum, tanks should stack for it, but optimally, the whole raid stacks for it. The reason why that rarely happens is simply that, due to most players not knowing which is which, and that there is danger in the first place, many don't even know to expect a stack, and some might even assume the tank is actively griefing if they point the laser at the raid like that. Thanks to the stacks not really getting that high, I ended up letting the other tank handle it. But because Swindler, the next miniboss, deals magic damage with its auto attacks, I felt compelled to take over for the first bit until the debuff at least ran out on my co-tank. A bonus aside about this boss is that the marker with the 4 swirling orbs is actually a 4 enumeration, meaning 4 players exactly should stand in it to nullify it. Problem is that it deals too little damage to even a single player for most parties to care. Vortexer, the final boss, also has a mechanic that rarely comes up that actually is a one-shot. At some point, an ice cube is spawned on the arena. Apparently by having one of the ice AoEs touch the water tornado the boss spawns. To survive the ultra flash that comes after that, you must hide behind the ice cube. You may never have seen this interaction before, but yeah, it seems like my team was doing kind of low damage. I think it's the first time I see it too. For duty 5, we went to Aitiascope. A quick tip at the very start of the duty is that the 2 wraiths at the very beginning are walled off from the next pack, so there isn't that much reason to try to drag them. On top of that, they actually hit surprisingly hard, so maybe serve them the dignity of using at least a defensive cooldown. Aside from this, the dungeon went surprisingly well, considering both of our DPS got a bunch of Vuln stacks on the first and the last boss. However, fortunately our healer was ready to handle it, so we simply pushed through. For duty 6, we went to Over the Helmet as White Mage, and you may be shocked to find that not much happened here. A really random detail is that Arrow is actually worthwhile as long as it takes at least 3 times, 9 seconds, over Stone. For duty 7, we went to Lunar Subterrane. Thanks to the changes of 7.4, we spawn in with the Blood Lily in hand. On top of that, we also have Planetary Indulgence now giving damage reduction, which mainly means when rate wage damage is coming, use Planetary before the damage lands, and then plan something like Rapture for the recovery right after. For Misery, a piece of advice is that the sheer power of this spell is such that you are likely to steal aggro from at least one mob that the tank pulled with only a single AoE attack, if you fire Misery from the hip straight off the bat. Depending on how fast your tank is pulling and how long the corridors are, it may be better to simply DA up every mob as you run and then use Misery when all of the mobs are pulled, and then work from there. Other times, if the pull is really long, maybe using Misery and then working through Lilies also may be a solid strategy. Just take note of how strong Misery is. On the second boss, we had a tank death due to not getting out of the sand pit fast enough. What was quite funny later in the fight is that for the next stack, which is what produces the sand pit, the tank outright just didn't participate. It is possible they simply didn't notice, but it's a bit funny that they might have avoided it out of fear of goofing it up again. Overall, the duty went at an alright pace, but I did really feel it slowed down a bit on boss fights, which mainly stood out on the final boss when we saw the next mechanic show up after the point where the fight normally ends. For duty 8, we went to Copperbell Mines. What was really peculiar about this run is that the tank was using Rampart, but they almost seemed like they just used Rampart at some point, if not on cooldown, while doing nearly full wall-to-wall pulls. Simultaneously, they were largely single-targeting mobs until I pointed out their AoE button would be smarter near the end of the duty. Pulling this big is perfectly manageable. Probably also manageable without defensives as long as the healer is ready to spam heal. This is also arguably optimal as long as the tank is actually spamming their AoE attack. For duty 9, we went to Rathalos Extreme again, with Taldamar this time. Overall, the fight went fine, with some scary moments, yet no deaths. What was a bit concerning is that the tank, that by the way was the one that queued for this duty, seemed oddly underprepared for this fight. By which I mean it seemed like they ran around a lot very confused. Thankfully, as the tank, they could get away with a lot more things. It is still a bit worrying since one player dying frequently can wipe the party on its own. Ultimately, we did make it through, so it was fine. For duty 10, we went to Ifrit Normal with Lechon, a nice and quick clear. Fun fact, the actual cutscene at the start of this duty is a few minutes long, so in almost every case, if there is someone watching that cutscene, it will make the duty a few times longer. The most significant part to that is that the cutscene has plenty of dialogue, and it does not auto-progress like in MSQ Roulette. For duty 11, we went to Rathalos Extreme again, this time with Snow Shiro, and that tank from before. For the first pull, we see a lot of a certain classic combo. First our Viper gets 1-2 comboed, then our Black Mage and Warrior gets knocked into the fire patch. Warrior lives thanks to tank privilege. Then, a bit later, I end up getting punted into the fire patch, leading to a wipe. On the second pull, we don't have any deaths, but both of the stack markers in phase 2 ends up targeting the Black Mage, and they also got hit at least once by avoidable damage, so they were running low on potions. Thankfully, the fight ended before that ended up mattering. For duty 12, we went to A4N, Alexander's Manipulator, as Gunbreaker, with Lechon. A big benefit of the Gunbreaker changes for a fight like this is that if the boss does a transition of some kind and is untargetable for a bit, for the most part, it doesn't matter since you can stockpile an extra charge of Gnashing Fang. Well, extra, since you want to use both and no mercy, I guess there isn't such a thing as an extra. Anyway, a small tip for the very end of a fight in general, which expands to any job that stockpiles things for their burst, is that if you can determine there won't be another full burst opportunity, sending what you have is probably beneficial, like in the case of Gunbreaker, using your one stored Gnashing Fang combo outside of No Mercy if the fight will end before that No Mercy anyway. For duty 13, we went to Ktisis Hyperboreia. This duty is in a very interesting level range for Gunbreaker, as you have just barely acquired the 3rd cartridge slot, but not double down, leading to a situation where on AoE, for example, with Bloodfest, you can, for the No Mercy combo, fit 6, sometimes 7 faded circles. Another thing this level range acquires is hypervelocity, which matters especially for 2.50 GSD Gunbreakers, where you can start a burst by using Burst Strike, No Mercy, hypervelocity to sneak in some extra damage. This duty went really well, although both our Sage and our Summoner had some minor issues with some of the portals on the final boss, so let's talk a bit about those. The first time he introduces the line AoE portals, they either strike at the outside of the arena primarily, or the inside. So if you glance and it doesn't look like they will definitely hit the middle, then go to the middle. Otherwise, probably get out. Later in the fight, he summons 4 waves of portals that each hit half of the arena in a rotating sequence. To dodge this efficiently, find where the first wave will hit and determine whether the portals resolve clockwise or counterclockwise, and stand in the 4th quadrant safe from both of the first 2 portals. After that, you can simply rotate a quarter around the arena each time a portal resolves. Take note that the portals hit half of the arena, so just rotating around the boss standing in the middle is good enough. For duty 14, we went to, man, I almost called this one by its actual name. The only danger in pulling everything up to the boss is that if the healer ends up getting silenced, you might actually die. But we had no major issues with that. For duty 15, we went to one of the new raid bosses from 7.4, so if you don't want to see that, jump to this timestamp here. That said, we went to M9N, Arcadion's Vamp Fatale, with Lechar, and some healers that knew me. Hello! Let's start with some Gunbreaker technical stuff. Throughout this fight, I attempt to do what I refer to as Wicked Mercy multiple times, but goof it up a lot. Eventually, I just stopped doing it. The essence of this trick is to sneak an eye gouge from the end of a Gnashing Fang combo into the No Mercy window, or a whole Wicked Talon if you're on a faster GCD. However, as I play on 2.5 GCD, doing this trick with an actively running 1-2-3 combo will always kill it. And let's just say that the damage gained from doing the trick is far outmatched by the potency lost by breaking your 1-2-3 combo. The general advice here is that if you don't feel 100% confident in your ability to maintain your rotation throughout a fight, and also do the setup exactly right for a trick like this, then simply don't do it. You will do more damage not styling on the boss. Trust me. For the boss fight then, I would say, strangely, the most dangerous phase in the fight seems to be the second Sadistic Screech. The reason for this is that one of the Pillar Soaks happens significantly out of melee range, which means it can easily spawn out of everyone's vision, and failing to catch it can quickly overwhelm the raid. Of course, you don't need a tank to take it, but this is one of those mechanics where if you want to be sure you win without wiping, taking the L and running out of melee range to catch this one is probably always worth it to be safe. Ranking after this, there's of course the first Sadistic Screech DPS check, but Vamp Fatale also seems to just hail the raid with unavoidable damage and raid wides, which puts a lot of the responsibility for succeeding this fight on the healers. Many of our DPS deaths boiled down to getting Vuln stacks first, of course. In the last third of the fight, I end up dying because I hesitated when moving between stack markers. Remember everyone, don't cross the streams, and don't try to take both. Thanks to the many deaths we had, I believe the fight started looping mechanics at around 25% left on the boss, which I don't know if that is slow or fast, but once she just looped mechanics, we managed to clean up the fight pretty fast. And finally for duty 16, we went to Rathalos Extreme, again, with Agent Monica, Snowshiro and Ilana. And of course, with a full community team, this is a safe clear. Although, I do think by the time Phase 2 rolled around, I was by far the one that got hit by avoidable stuff the most. Tank privilege, I guess. A really random tip for optimizing this fight is on the first down, if you are certain the tail will get cut in time, Putting some of your damage directly on Rathalos instead gets more value out of the down, as it is cut short when the tail is cut short. But if you don't cut the tail before Rathalos gets up, you're pretty much guaranteed to get robbed of the entire next down, so it has to be a sure thing before you start spreading your damage. The main benefit of spreading your damage a bit is that if your team's damage is a bit on the lower side for some reason, doing so can be necessary to finish the fight on the second down. But then of course, if your team's damage is on the lower side, not hard focusing the tail could also pose a problem. Quite an interesting set of duties, hilariously featuring more Rathalos Extremes than guild hests. With a few weeks of recent results, I can also say that it seems like lower level content appears to have increased quite a lot in representation, at least for tanks and healers in Mentor Roulette. We also passed 25 39s on the achievement. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Twitch or Ko-Fi, links in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, before Endwalker, not only was Paladin's requiescat potency based on how much MP you had when you used it, but if you had less than 80% of maximum, you just didn't get the buff at all.